wife do was go in a back room and strip before the judge and the jury. And one of the hypodensic tests was that if her breasts had black rings around her nipples, that would classify her as a Negro. That was one of the things that they were using to judge whether a woman was, as what they say, a negress or not. Is that not madness? Yeah.
Wow.
We put the term eugenics in. I want you to put this name in your notes. Margaret Singer. Y'all ever heard of her? My man ready to go. That sounds good, but I got stuff to do. Margaret Singer. Does she ring a bell? Anybody? She ring a bell? What about Planned Parenthood? Does that ring a bell? Margaret Singer revealed her plan to the Ku Klux Klan, the women of the Ku Klux Klan. And her plan was to create a one-stop shop to where black women could come and do away with their babies. And her prediction was that eventually, or the prediction of some of the people around her, was that she would eventually get to provide the money to do it. Infanticide. It is now a state responsibility. What did Pharaoh want to do to the little Hebrew children?
Oh yeah, exterminate them.
Why the children? He wanted to go after the children. Bertrand Russell said in his book Science and Religion that what would happen would begin to happen was that the state would end up developing programs to cut people off as a form of population control, but you would cut them off before they could reach the age of reproduction. That's what Bertrand Russell said. He was a philosopher, mathematician. A lot of the kids, your math books, if you look at who was responsible for Bertrand Russell, well, you'd be surprised at who you studying and who you... You know the person, let's put his name up on the board. I like to put names on the board. Louis Agassiz. Y'all ever heard of the Ice Age? Well, do you know the guy who came up with the theory, and I did say theory, of the Ice Age, also was a main proponent of the inferiority of black people? So a lot of the paleontology that you study and a lot of the Paleolithic writings that people studied was actually studied by someone who believed in the inferiority of black people. That's why I said the culture, be it Europe or America, it doesn't matter. The people who established the culture thought black people were monkeys. So we're going to conclude the lesson today, and I'll entertain any questions that you have, but I'll put a heck of a lot up on this board. You know. But, you know, the underlying matter is that, like my father said, if you didn't create it, you don't own it.
That's right.
And if you don't protect it, you will lose it.
That's right.
So hopefully in future lectures we'll go further, but I'll entertain any questions. I'll explain the boards here. My students did this for me. And if you have any questions, we'll go from there. But this board is about Jim Crow and lynching. Okay? The way that black people were subdued in the South was through terror. Okay? Like I said, black people never accepted the idea of inferiority. The slaves didn't even. The slaves despised their masters. They didn't want to be like them. They didn't want to be around them. We have this myth or folklore that the slaves who lived in the house loved to be there. No, they didn't. Those were the ones that got beat the most. Those were the ones that also got sold the quickest. So Frederick Douglass told us that. So when we build off of the slave narratives, what the truth is, people can't come behind us, you know, and muddy the waters. Okay? And I'll just say this, a lot of the black history that is out there, that black teachers even teach, was actually given to them by non-black sources. The interpretations of the history, I mean, it's interesting.
Carter G. Woodson talks about that. How,
Sure.
How your form of education with HBCUs have been given
Sure,
by white people that have rewritten our history.
that's right. That's right. And so with the cases that we'll go over next time and what was said in those court cases, you'll see how the mob was given an opportunity to rule. And so the mob always was a small group of people who controlled larger groups of people through terror. The terrorism that these so-called Muslim terrorists are doing, that's an old play. It's a whole lot older than Bin Laden and 1980. I mean, the technique and the mind behind it is not a Muslim idea.
Right.
It's somebody else's idea. It's a technique to subdue people,
Right.
to take the theater of war into a domestic area. You see? And there are people that do that. They want the society to remain intact. They just want to control it through fear. And so lynching was a part of that. The term picnic comes from lynching. A picnic was when they would pick a black person and lynch them and then have a feast under the dead body. When you go, there's a book called Without Sanctuary, and in it, it talks about, or it gives pictures of the lynchings that happened throughout the South. You know, one of the number one, or one of the lynching capitals of the South, you know what was? Millbrook, Alabama.
Really?
Where?
Millbrook, Alabama.
Do you want me to go into my notes, or?
Wow.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Millbrook, Alabama. Yeah. I've got a survey of lynching in my office, and it lists Millbrook as one of the top places for lynchings in the South.
Wow.
Yeah. Millbrook, Prattville, this area right in here. Mm-hmm. So, after we get finished, you can come by and look at our board on lynching here, and it talks about, it gives you different instances of lynching and so forth. Very, very informative board. Oh, here's another one on lynching. Right here. And it gives the lynching by state and race 1882 to 1968. It tells you all of the lynchings that took place, how many whites were lynched, how many blacks were lynched in the different states. And you have some pictures here of black people who had been lynched. Some of them, people made in the postcards. And so they would send their friends and relatives postcards that have the pictures of lynched black people on it. And see, people, I can understand why folks don't want to talk about this. And I can understand, because whenever I'm asked to speak somewhere, people always say, Dr. White, we just cringe when you stand up there. And I'm like, why? Because we don't know what you're going to say. And the only thing I'm going to say is what has been written. That's it. I'm not going to give a theory. I'm not going to give you my own personal opinion on something. I am going to give you what has already been established. Nobody wants to talk about it. And so I don't have any hate in me, but there's a whole lot of folks I don't trust because of this.
Right.
And I think I'm justified.
Right.
Okay? Now, this poster here is important because part of the program was to represent black people as being less than human. It was part of the indoctrination program. And so you have actors like Burt Williams who were black already but dressed in blackface